I would rather die than let that man take her from me again." The words tore out of Nicholas Calabrese before he could stop them, raw and dangerous as a blade wrapped in ice. His voice dropped to nothing after that, settling into the kind of silence that made grown men flinch. 3:22 in the morning. Sal's diner sat empty except for the skeleton crew, the black and white checkered floor gleaming under fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. Rain hammered against the windows, streaking the glass in diagonal slashes. The neon sign outside flickered red, then blue, then red again, casting everything in a sickly glow. The air hung thick and wet, stale coffee, grease from the kitchen, the smell of a place that never quite closed. Nicholas occupied his usual back booth, the one that faced both exits. His suit cost more than most people's cars, charcoal wool, tailored in Milan, not a single thread out of place. His left wrist bore a watch of white gold and platinum, catching the fluorescent light with each small movement. The coffee in front of him had gone cold an hour ago. He had not touched it. He never touched anything when he was thinking. Vinny and Nino sat 2 booths away, pretending not to watch him, the way men did when they worked for someone who could destroy them with a phone call. The door swung open. Rain poured in with a gust of wind that made the whole diner shudder. A woman stumbled through, soaked through completely, her clothes clinging to skin like a second grave. Her left eye was swollen shut, the socket a landscape of purple and black bruising. Down her throat ran finger-shaped marks, dark as old blood, pressed deep into the soft skin where someone had tried to strangle the life out of her. Her lip split open at the corner. One of her front teeth looked like it might be loose. She carried 2 grocery bags. They dragged at her shoulders like anchor stones. She made it 3 steps into the diner before her knees buckled. Her body went down like a building with cut supports. Nicholas looked up from his cold coffee. The groceries scattered across the checkered floor. A box of cereal. A loaf of bread. A carton of milk that rolled underneath a table. Canned beans arranged like fallen soldiers. Vinny and Nino moved. They always moved when something broke in Nicholas Calabrese's restaurant. But Nicholas raised his left hand, just the fingers, and both men froze mid-step. They had worked for him long enough to recognize that gesture. It meant stop. It meant do not move. It meant something inside the boss had shifted into a register they did not understand. The woman lay 5 feet from his booth. Her functioning eye, the right one, dark brown, ringed with exhaustion, was struggling to focus on the ceiling. Blood mixed with rainwater on the checkered floor, creating thin pink streams between the black and white squares. Then the door opened again. 2 figures entered, moving with the confidence of people who owned the space they walked through. The man was tall, mid-50s, with the kind of shoulders that spoke of a life spent using his body as a weapon. His jacket hung open, revealing a shirt unbuttoned at the collar. A scar ran down the left side of his neck, puckering the skin. His eyes were the color of old coins, and they swept the diner with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. This was Douglas Hale. Behind him came a woman in her 40s, blonde hair styled with the precision of someone who spent $400 on her cut. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than the groceries scattered across the diner floor. Her smile was predatory, like a woman examining merchandise that had failed to perform. This was Rachel Dawson. Nicholas's eyes narrowed. A single muscle moved in his jaw. That was the only acknowledgement he gave. Douglas Hale's eyes found the woman on the floor. Recognition flashed across his face. His hand moved toward his jacket. Rachel Dawson placed one hand on his arm, a gesture that said patience. They had not yet seen Nicholas Calabrese. Not really. The shadows in the back booth hid him the way shadows had hidden him his entire life. But what Mia Voss did not know, as she lay bleeding on that checkered floor, her broken eye staring at a ceiling that would not stop spinning, was that 3 weeks ago, she had walked into a community center basement and begun reading stories to a small girl with copper-colored hair and her father's gray eyes. The girl was named Emma. She was 6 years old. She had been missing for 2 years. Emma was Nicholas Calabrese's daughter. Her name was Mia Voss, and she was a waitress at this diner. She worked the night shift because the day shift paid minimum wage, and she had 2 children waiting at home, children whose school supplies cost money she did not have. She had $5 in her pocket. $5 was all she had left in the world. She did not know she was walking toward something that would burn everything down and rebuild it into something neither broken nor whole, but something new. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Every comment you leave matters to us. We read them. They fuel the stories we tell. Now let us go back. Back to that summer thunderstorm, back to the moment that set all of this in motion. Back to where a woman walked away from the man who had tried to kill her, and in walking away, changed the course of both their lives forever. The rain had started at midnight. It came down like bullets, hard and relentless, turning the Vegas streets into rivers of broken neon and desperation. Mia Voss walked them anyway, her shoes splitting at the seams, her waitress uniform soaked through completely. She had just finished a double shift at a different diner, not Sal's, not yet, and her feet were blistered to the point of bleeding. The bus stop was 6 blocks away. She would make it. She always made it. What changed was Douglas Hale stepping out of the darkness 2 blocks from her apartment, moving with the certainty of a predator who has already calculated the location of every exit. He grabbed her wrist. His hand was large enough that his fingers wrapped around her arm twice over, and they dug in with the kind of pressure that made her understand immediately that this was not negotiation. "Where are you going?" His voice came out soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Home," Mia said. Her voice was small but steady. She had learned, over 3 years of knowing Douglas Hale, that showing fear only encouraged him. "Rachel wants to talk to you about a business opportunity." Rachel Dawson was Douglas Hale's partner in an operation that Mia understood only in fragments and pieces. She knew it involved women. She knew it involved taking things, dignity, choice, futures, and selling them to men who had money enough to buy anything that moved. She knew that when Douglas used the words business opportunity in that soft, deadly voice, he meant something that would destroy her. She said no. She said it the way a small animal says no to a trap, with everything she had, even knowing it would not matter. He had pressed his hands to her throat then, and the world had gone white and then red and then black at the edges. His thumbs dug into the soft hollow at the base of her windpipe. She could not breathe. She could not scream. She could only understand, in that moment where oxygen stopped reaching her brain, that she was going to die on a Vegas street in the rain, and nobody would ever know her name. But her hands were free. Her hands came up and she drove her fingers toward his eyes, connecting with something that made him howl and release her. She fell backward, gasping, her throat on fire, and she ran. She ran through the rain without direction, without destination, knowing only that if she stopped running, he would follow, and the next time his hands found her throat, they would not let go until she was still. She ran until she saw the neon glow. Sal's diner burned like a beacon, red and blue and desperate. She pushed through the door at 3:22 in the morning, soaked and bleeding and barely able to see through the swelling in her eye, and her knees gave out 5 feet from a back booth where a man in a suit worth more than everything she owned was drinking cold coffee and thinking thoughts that would reshape the criminal underworld of Las Vegas. Neither of them knew it yet. But everything was about to change. The door was still open. Cold rain blew across the checkered floor. And in the distance, the sound of an engine approaching, measured and unhurried, carrying 2 people who had no intention of leaving until Mia Voss agreed to walk willingly into the kind of hell that made even the damned weep. 11:47 at night. The kitchen of Sal's diner smelled like grease burned at the edges and coffee that had been sitting in the pot since the dinner rush ended 4 hours ago. Mia Voss stood at the counter in the back, her apron stained with things she did not want to identify, counting bills and coins with trembling fingers. $43.18. That was all she had earned in 8 hours of standing on her feet, smiling at people who did not see her, refilling water glasses for customers who left $2 tips on $50 meals. $43.18, and she needed $127 by Monday morning for Tyler's school supplies and Sophia's uniform and the field trip permission slip that cost more than she had earned in 2 days. She closed her eyes. The fluorescent lights hummed above her head like dying insects trapped in plastic. Her feet ached in shoes with worn-through soles. When she walked, she could feel the heat of the pavement through the rubber. The bottoms of her socks had holes the size of quarters. At home, 3 miles away in a neighborhood where the streetlights did not work and the sound of sirens was as constant as breathing, her 2 children were sleeping on a mattress they shared. Tyler was 8 years old and already worried about money. Sophia was 6 and still believed that the neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was doing them a kindness by watching them at night. Mrs. Chen needed the company more than Mia needed the favor, but neither of them said this out loud. Mia put the money in her pocket. $32 she had already earned on previous nights, hidden in a coffee tin in her bedroom, bringing her total to $75.18. $51.82 away from what the children needed. For more nights like this one. For more nights of smiling. For more nights of her feet screaming and her back breaking and her hands going numb from carrying plates that weighed as much as stones. She clocked out. The diner manager, a man named Roger who had never once made eye contact with her, nodded without looking up from his ledger. Outside, Vegas burned with neon and heat even at midnight. The summer humidity pressed down like a palm against her chest, thick and suffocating. She had 2 grocery bags to carry home, dented cans from the deli section, marked down bread, the things she could afford. Her palms ached where the plastic handles cut into her skin. The walk home took 40 minutes. She cut through neighborhoods that grew darker with each block, where the houses shrank and the sidewalks cracked, where the people who lived in the casino towers never came. It was past midnight when she turned onto the corner of Palm and 7th, where the convenience store still blazed with fluorescent lights. She had planned to go straight through, straight home, but the door opened. A woman stepped out first. Rachel Dawson moved like money had taught her to move, each step deliberate, each gesture calculated. She was 48 years old but looked 35, her body a sculpture of discipline and expensive personal training. Her dress was black and simple and cost more than Mia's rent. Her heels were designer shoes, Italian leather, clicking against the concrete like a clock counting down. Her hair was blonde and perfectly arranged, her nails were crimson, and her eyes held the kind of light that comes from never having been told no. Behind her came Douglas Hale. He was taller, thicker through the shoulders, the kind of man who looked like he had been built in a prison yard. His face was weathered, his jaw dark with stubble, his eyes the color of smoke. He wore a thin gold chain around his neck and rings on 3 fingers. When he moved, his body suggested violence the way a coiled rope suggests a whip. Douglas stepped in front of her. The concrete was still warm from the day's heat, radiating upward through her worn shoes. "Mia," Rachel said, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. "We have been looking for you." Mia's throat tightened. She knew these people. She knew them from the community center where she volunteered on Saturday mornings, teaching free art classes to children whose parents worked at night. Rachel had been kind then, bringing coffee, asking questions, learning that Mia was a single mother, that she worked double shifts, that her children slept on a mattress older than they were. "Hello," Mia said. It came out barely a whisper. "You look tired," Rachel observed. She pulled a cigarette from her purse and lit it with a silver lighter. The flame caught in the darkness. "Working hard." "Yes. The children need. We know what they need." Douglas stepped closer. "We know you need money." The air around Mia seemed to contract. The neon signs from the convenience store reflected off the glass, and she could see herself in the window, small, worn, exhausted, a woman already disappearing into the background of her own life. "That apartment we helped you get," Rachel continued, smoke curling from her mouth. "The job referral at Sal's. Do you know how much we invested in you?" "I did not ask for." $125,000. Rachel let the number hang in the air between them. "That is what we put into your future, Mia. The first month's rent, the down payment on decent clothes, the references we made on your behalf to people who could have destroyed you instead. Mia opened her mouth. Closed it. You owe us, Douglas said. His voice was like gravel in a truck bed, rough and heavy. Rachel has a network. Good money. Clean work. You are perfect for what she needs. No. Mia stepped backward. I will not. I have children. Exactly. Rachel smiled. Her teeth were too white. Your children need things. We are offering you the ability to give them things. Education. Stability. The kind of life that children deserve to have. You are asking me to, Mia's voice broke. You are asking me to. We are asking you to be smart, Douglas said. He moved closer. His shadow fell across her face. We invested in you. Now you invest back. 7 days, Mia. You have 7 days to think about this. To understand that cooperation is the only way forward. After 7 days, we will collect what we are owed. One way or another. I will never do what you are asking. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. They hung in the humid Vegas air like a prayer that nobody was going to answer. Douglas's hand came up. His fingers closed around her throat. The sensation was immediate and absolute. His grip was not gentle. It was the grip of a man who had done this before, who understood the exact pressure needed to shut off the blood flow to the brain without crushing the windpipe completely. Not yet, anyway. He slammed her back against the brick wall of the convenience store. Her skull connected with concrete and stars exploded across her vision. You will do what we ask, Douglas said, his voice still gravel, still calm. Because the alternative is worse than you can imagine. Mia could not breathe. The world was collapsing inward, the neon signs blurring, her vision darkening at the edges like someone was turning down the brightness on the world. She could feel the ragged brick scraping against her shoulder blades. She could feel the edge of consciousness beginning to slip away. Her hand came up without her permission. Her fingernails, broken and worn, found his eyes and she drove her fingers forward with everything she had left. Douglas screamed. His grip released. Mia fell forward, gasping, her throat on fire, her lungs pulling in air that felt like swallowing razors. She could see him stumbling backward, his hands covering his face, blood running down his cheeks. The rain started then. It came without warning, the kind of summer storm that arrives when the heat and humidity collide and explode across the city. One moment the night was dry and burning. The next moment sheets of water poured down from clouds that had been invisible moments before. Mia ran. She ran without direction, without destination, knowing only that if she stopped, he would follow. Lightning cracked across the sky and lit the world white and terrible for a single moment. Thunder rolled like the voice of God. She ran past closed shops and dark houses. She ran through rain that soaked her instantly, that made every step treacherous. She ran until her lungs felt like they might tear open. And then she saw it. Sal's diner glowed in the darkness like a beacon. Red and blue neon burned through the rain, casting everything in shades of blood and sadness. The windows were warm and yellow with light. Through the glass, she could see the booths, the counter, the coffee pots on the burners. It was open. There were people inside. Mia pushed through the glass door and her knees gave way 5 feet inside. She crashed to the checkered floor, black and white like a checkerboard, like a board where someone was playing a game that only they understood the rules to. Her hands pressed against the floor. The tile was cold and damp from the rain she had tracked in. In the back booth, a man sat alone. He wore a suit that probably cost more than the entire building Mia lived in. The suit was charcoal gray and tailored to fit him perfectly, the kind of fit that only came from a tailor who had been trained since childhood. His shirt was white, expensive cotton, with the first 3 buttons undone to show a chest that was scarred and muscular. His hair was dark, graying at the temples, cut with precision. A scar ran from below his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that had healed perfectly, as if someone had been very careful to make sure it would not get infected. His name was Nicholas Calabrese. He was 46 years old, and he had spent the last 23 years building the most sophisticated criminal operation in Las Vegas. He owned casinos and restaurants and nightclubs. He had money hidden in accounts in 12 countries. He had men who would kill for him. He had lawyers who were better than the government lawyers. He had judges who took his calls. He was the kind of man who could make someone disappear so completely that the disappearance would never be investigated. He was also the kind of man who did not show emotion. But when Mia Voss collapsed on the checkered floor of Sal's diner at 3:22 in the morning, soaking wet and bleeding from her eye and with finger-shaped bruises darkening across her throat, something shifted in Nicholas Calabrese's chest. He stood. Vinny and Nino, who were sitting at the counter, turned to see what had caused their boss to move. In 7 years, they had rarely seen him stand up unless he had a very good reason. Nicholas walked toward the woman on the floor. Each step was measured and deliberate. He moved like a general surveying a battlefield, like a man who knew exactly where he was going and exactly what he would find when he got there. He knelt beside her. And then he saw the drawing that had fallen from her pocket. It was a child's drawing, done in crayon on plain white paper. A family, 2 adults and 2 children standing in front of a house with a yellow sun and blue sky. One of the figures had a crown drawn on top of the head. Written in careful, childish letters were the words, "My mommy and Emma and Tyler and Sophia." Happy day. Nicholas's hand trembled as he picked it up. The door to the diner was still open. Rain blew across the checkered floor. And in the distance, barely audible above the sound of the storm, an engine approached, measured and unhurried, carrying 2 people who had come to collect a debt they intended to extract in blood if cooperation would not suffice. The checkered floor of Sal's diner stretched out like a battlefield, black and white squares reflecting the neon glow of the dying diner lights. Rain hammered against the windows in sheets, and the clock above the counter read 3:22 in the morning. Nicholas Calabrese sat alone in his usual booth at the back, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him, when the door burst open and a woman collapsed onto the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Vinny and Nino looked up from the counter. In 7 years of working for Nicholas, they had rarely seen him move without calculation. But he stood now. Each step measured and deliberate, he walked toward the woman on the floor. Her left eye was swollen shut, her throat wrapped in purple bruises shaped like fingers, like hands that had tried to squeeze the life out of her. Blood ran from her split lip. She was gasping for air, her body curled and trembling, soaking wet from the rain outside. Nicholas knelt beside her. That was when he saw the drawing. A piece of white paper, crayon-colored, had fallen from her pocket. A family, 2 adults, 2 children, standing in front of a house with a yellow sun and blue sky above. One figure wore a crown drawn in yellow crayon. Careful childish letters spelled out, "For my mommy and Emma and Tyler and Sophia." Happy day. Nicholas's hand trembled as he picked it up. The door to the diner was still open. Rain blew across the floor. And then, the engine. Measured. Unhurried. A black SUV pulled up to the curb outside, then another. Doors opened. Footsteps crossed the wet asphalt. Vinny moved fast. He and Nino blocked the entrance, their bodies filling the doorway like a wall. Behind them came Douglas Hale, a man in his early 50s with graying hair and the kind of smile that belonged in a nightmare. Behind him walked Rachel Dawson, dressed in a designer suit that cost more than Mia's annual salary, her face carved from ice and cruelty. That woman, Douglas said, his voice smooth like poison, belongs to us. She has a debt. Walk away, Mr. Calabrese, and we will forget we ever saw you here tonight. Nicholas did not look up from Mia's face. Her one functioning eye was open now, focused on him. Recognition flickered across her features. She had seen him at Riverside Community Center, watching from the parking lot. She had seen him watching Emma. Her lips moved, barely audible, trembling like a candle in the wind. "Emma," she whispered through the blood. "Is she safe?" Nicholas's entire body went still. In the background, Vinny and Nino exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. Their boss's hands were shaking. This man, who had ordered his own brother's death, whose body was never found, who had learned that mercy was a luxury only the living could afford, was shaking. "You protected my daughter," Nicholas said, lifting Mia carefully, cradling her against his chest. "When you had nothing. When you were barely surviving yourself." Mia's eye closed. She needed someone. Behind them, Douglas shouted, "That woman signed a contract. She owes Rachel Dawson $125,000, and she will pay it or work for us. You have no legal claim here." Nicholas turned. His expression, Vinny would describe it later as death walking, as a blade wrapped in ice, as the look a man gets when he has already decided to burn the world down. He looked at Vinny. One glance. That was all it took. Vinny and Nino stepped aside. 12 men materialized from the rain outside, moving like ghosts in dark suits, surrounding Douglas and Rachel. Douglas's face went white. He had made a calculation and found himself drastically miscalculated. "Get her to the car," Nicholas said to Vinny, not taking his eyes off Douglas. "Call Dr. Santos. Tell him we are coming." "Boss," Vinny said, stepping forward, "what do we do about them?" "Find out everything," Nicholas said quietly. "Where they live. Who they work with. How many women they have trapped. How much money flows through their accounts. Find it all, and find it in the next 3 hours. We are going to end this tonight." Nicholas carried Mia out into the rain, her body light in his arms, the drawing still clutched in his hand. The thunder rolled across Las Vegas like a distant warning. Behind him, Douglas Hale was already making calculations of his own, though they would all prove useless by dawn. 3 hours later, at 6:58 in the morning, Mia woke in a bed she did not recognize. The sheets were expensive cotton, the kind that felt like silk against her skin. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Las Vegas waking up under summer heat, the city spread out below like a kingdom of glass and light. Her left eye was bandaged. Her throat had been treated, wrapped carefully. Everything hurt, but the pain was distant, managed, controlled by medication flowing through and for in her arm. She panicked. Where were Tyler and Sophia? The door opened. Nicholas Calabrese entered, and the morning light caught the sharp lines of his face. Tall. Muscular. Dark hair silvered at the temples. He wore a white linen shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, and expensive trousers. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone. His eyes were dark, not black, but a grey-brown that looked like a storm building on the horizon. "Your children are safe," he said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "My people brought them here 3 hours ago. They are sleeping in the next room." Mia tried to sit up, winced. "Why? Why would you help me? I am nobody. I work night shifts at a diner. I cannot even." "You saved my daughter," Nicholas interrupted, pulling a chair close but maintaining distance. "When you had nothing. When you were barely surviving yourself." He sat down slowly, as if carrying weight no one else could see. "Emma was taken from me 2 years ago," he continued. "My own brother, family, sold her location to our enemies for $200,000. I had to kill him. I found Emma 3 weeks ago at Riverside Community Center. Do you know why I did not take her immediately? Why I did not bring her home?" Mia shook her head, her eye fixed on his face. "Because she was happy," Nicholas said. "For the first time since her mother died, my daughter was laughing. She was holding hands with you, wearing a pink ribbon you bought her. She was drawing pictures of you. And I realized that keeping her alive was not enough. She needed to be alive in a way that mattered." He leaned forward slightly. "You were making minimum wage. Walking miles in the rain. Counting pennies. And you still shared your lunch with her. You still bought her crayons with money you needed for your own children." The rain outside began again. A summer thunderstorm, the kind that rolled across the desert without warning. The sound of it against the windows was like thousands of fingers tapping, 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 urgent and endless. "I am sorry," Mia whispered. "I did not know she was your daughter. I just saw a little girl who needed kindness." "That is exactly why you are family," Nicholas said. At 8:30 in the morning, Tyler and Sophia ran into the kitchen where Mia sat at a table that seated 12. They crashed into her, screaming and crying, and she held them despite the pain shooting through her ribs, despite her bandaged eye, despite everything that hurt. She held them and breathed in the smell of their hair, the soap Nicholas's people had used to wash them. Nicholas watched from the doorway. Vinny and Nino stood behind him, motionless. Then Emma appeared. She was 5 years old, small-boned, with dark hair and eyes like her father's. When she saw Mia, she ran. "Miss Mia! You are here!" Mia pulled Emma into her arms, and for the first time since the night Douglas Hale had driven her to the ground and wrapped his hands around her throat, she felt something that was not fear. She felt safe. She felt like someone who mattered. Vinny leaned toward Nino and whispered, barely audible, "In 15 years I have never seen him like this. Never." Nicholas's face showed something raw, something unguarded. His hands clenched at his sides. His jaw worked silently. And for just a moment, before he controlled it, before he locked it back behind the wall he had built over decades, Vinny and Nino saw their boss as he might have been if his life had gone differently. As he might have been if mercy had been possible. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Nicholas explained the debt. "Human trafficking," he said, and his voice was different now, flat, controlled, deadly. "Rachel Dawson runs a network across 3 states. Douglas Hale supplies her with desperate women. Women with children. Women with debt. Women with nowhere else to turn. He approaches them at grief support groups, churches, hospitals. He offers help. Rachel pays first month's rent. Provides fake job placement paperwork. Then, after a few weeks, they demand payment. Fabricated debts. Impossible amounts. Women cannot pay, so they sign contracts. The contracts bind them to Rachel's network for work that Rachel does not specify. When they refuse, she takes their children." Mia sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she did not drink. "He approached me at a grief support group," she said, her voice barely a whisper. 3 months after my husband died. He knew about housing assistance. Job placement. Rachel paid my first month's rent. I thought they were helping me. Then last week, Douglas appeared at my apartment. He said I owed them $125,000 for their investment in me. When I refused to join Rachel's network, he said they would take Tyler and Sophia instead. He said I had 7 days to decide." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "The bruises on your throat." "He wanted to convince me," Mia said. "He wanted to make sure I understood what would happen if I did not cooperate." At 2 o'clock, Rachel Dawson arrived at the building. She demanded entry. Nicholas met her in the lobby, and what happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Rachel was immaculate, designer suit the color of midnight, hair pulled back so tight it looked like it might split her scalp, makeup applied with surgical precision. Cold eyes. Eyes that had looked at desperate women and saw only profit. "Mr. Calabrese," she said, extending a hand. "I see you have my asset." Nicholas did not take her hand. He let it drop. "Mia Voss did not sign any contract willingly," he said. "She signed under duress and false pretenses. The debt is fabricated." "Prove it in court," Rachel said, and she smiled. Her smile was the most dangerous thing about her. "Oh wait, Mia cannot afford a lawyer. And I have 12 women who will testify they owed me similar amounts. All perfectly legal. Return her by midnight, or I file kidnapping charges against you and your organization." She turned to leave. "Rachel," Nicholas said, and his voice stopped her at the door. "You should know something. You should know that I have decided what happens to you. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But before the end of the week, you will understand what mercy looks like, because I will show you exactly how it feels to lose everything you built. Rachel laughed. Threats, Mr. Calabrese? How pedestrian. She left. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Mia insisted on leaving. I will not put Emma in danger, she said, standing despite her injuries, despite the pain. Or my children. I will find another way. I always do. Nicholas stopped her at the door to the bedroom. There is no other way with people like Rachel. There never is. She will take everything. She will take your children, and you will never see them again. That is not a threat. That is what she does. Mia pulled something from her bag, a book with a worn leather cover, pages yellowed with age, stains from cooking oil and time. This is all I have left of my family, she said. My grandmother's recipes. She was a cook in Las Vegas in the 1960s. These recipes fed me when I had nothing else. When my husband was sick, when we had no money for food, I made her recipes and we survived. Nicholas took the book gently, carefully, as if it might break. He opened it to a random page and stopped. His hand froze. In the margins, in faded handwriting, Marie Castellano, 1962. Boston baked beans for little Dominic. He ate 3 portions. Remember to use less salt next time. Love, Marie. More pages. More margins. More names. More dates. All handwritten in the same careful script. Nicholas sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Your grandmother was Marie Castellano, he said. It was not a question. Mia stared at him. She went by Marie Voss after she married. How could you possibly know? Marie Castellano was my father's aunt, Nicholas said. She left the family in 1965 when she married outside the organization. We thought that line of our family was lost. We thought it ended. He looked at Mia, really looked at her, seeing past the bruises, past the fear, past everything to the bones of her face, to the structure of her jaw, to the shape of her eyes. You are family, he said. You are my cousin, 3 times removed. You are blood. The room went silent except for the rain starting again outside, another summer thunderstorm rolling across the desert, thunder so distant it sounded like a heartbeat, like the earth itself was breathing. Mia stared at the recipe book, at her grandmother's handwriting, at the names and dates and love notes written in the margins of each page. I did not know, she whispered. Neither did I, Nicholas said. But it changes everything. He pulled out his phone and made a call. His voice when he spoke was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute command. Vinny. I need everything on Douglas Hale and Rachel Dawson. Every transaction. Every woman they have trapped. Every account. Every connection. And I need it in 3 hours. We are going to end this tonight. These people will not exist by sunrise. He ended the call. Outside, the lightning split the sky like a blade, and the rain came down harder, faster, as if the heavens themselves had decided to wash something away. The apartment was so quiet you could hear the rain hammering against the windows like fists demanding entry. Mia stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass, watching the desert sky split open with lightning, and her reflection stared back at her, a stranger wearing her face. One eye swollen shut, her throat a map of purple and yellow bruises where Douglas's hands had tried to erase her. Her split lip had begun to heal, but healing was not the same as forgetting. Behind her, in the bedroom across the hall, her children slept. Tyler, age 7, his small chest rising and falling with the innocence of a child who still believed his mother could protect him. Sophia, age 5, curled against Emma like they were siblings separated at birth and finally returned to each other. Emma's hand rested on Sophia's shoulder even in sleep, as if the child understood that letting go meant losing everything again. Mia's hands trembled as she opened the recipe book. Her grandmother's handwriting filled every margin, careful, precise, deliberate. Names and dates. Marie Castellano, married to Vincent Voss, June 1965. Children born, 1 daughter, Caroline. Grandchildren, Michael and Sarah. And then, in Marie's unmistakable script, a note beside Sarah's name: she will not know her family. She will be safer far away. I chose love over loyalty. I chose life over the organization. If you are reading this and you are my blood, know that you carry strength. You carry survival. You carry choice. Mia's knees buckled. She sat on the edge of the bed, the recipe book open to her grandmother's chicken soup recipe. In the margins, when the storm comes, you make soup. You feed the people who stay. This is how we survive. One tear dropped onto the page. The ink blurred, spreading like a small dark bloom. Mia stared at it, and something in her chest shifted. This tiny imperfection, this accident of water on paper, stopped the spiral consuming her. Her grandmother had written these words knowing hardship. Marie Castellano had walked away from power and money and family legacy to build something real. She had fed people. She had stayed. Mia closed the book gently and set it on the nightstand beside the lamp. She walked to the children's room and stood in the doorway, watching them breathe. Tyler's arm was flung across his forehead. Sophia's mouth hung slightly open. Emma lay between them both, her small body the bridge connecting everything. 2 years. 2 years of double shifts and walking miles through rain and counting pennies and feeding her children first, always first, going hungry herself on nights when the diner was slow and tips were thin. 2 years of volunteering at the community center on her 15-minute breaks because those children needed someone to see them, just like she needed someone to see her. And now there was family. A man who looked at Emma with the same desperate love Mia felt for her own children. A crime boss who had chosen her. 2 monsters who wanted to drag her into darkness and use her body to feed their empire. Mia whispered a prayer she had learned from her grandmother's book, not the kind you spoke aloud but the kind you held inside, the kind that became your backbone when everything else fractured. She did not cry. Not anymore. 9 blocks away, at Sal's diner, the neon signs flickered against the rain-streaked windows like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Nicholas Calabrese sat alone in the back booth, the same booth where everything had changed. A cup of coffee sat untouched before him. He was not drinking. He was waiting. The diner was closed to customers. Vinny and Nino stood near the kitchen, their presence a wall of controlled violence. They had brought the recipe book back from the apartment, had confirmed what Nicholas already knew. Marie Castellano. His father's aunt. The woman who had disappeared from the family in 1965 and become a ghost in their collective memory. The door of the diner opened. Rain swept across the black and white checkered floor. Douglas Hale stepped inside, water dripping from his expensive jacket, his face wearing the expression of a man who believed himself untouchable. Behind him came 2 more men in tailored suits, his muscle, his insurance policy against a world that might hurt him. "Where is she?" Douglas demanded. His voice was the voice of a man accustomed to compliance. Nicholas sipped his coffee. The cup clinked against the saucer like a tiny bell announcing the end of something. "Somewhere you will never touch her again," he said quietly. Douglas's hand moved toward his jacket. The gun came out smooth and practiced, the barrel aimed at Nicholas's chest. "You do not know who you are messing with. Rachel has connections. Judges. Cops. Politicians. She can make you disappear." Nicholas did not move. Did not flinch. Did not even lower his coffee cup. "So can I," he said. The words fell into the silence like stones into water. Douglas's finger tightened on the trigger, his jaw clenching. But before he could shoot, before he could even speak, the diner door opened again. 3 men entered. Not Nicholas's men. Not anyone Douglas recognized. They wore dark suits identical to his own, but on their left sleeves, embroidered in silver thread, was a crest, a circle within a circle, interlocking dragons. The Nakamura family. One of the most dangerous organizations on the West Coast. Douglas's face drained of color. The gun wavered. "You owe us $340,000, the Nakamura lieutenant said. His English was perfect, his tone conversational, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Gambling debts from the Golden Dragon Casino. You have been using the trafficking network to make payments. We know everything, Douglas. We know the account numbers. We know the dates. We know the women." "I can pay," Douglas whispered. "I can?" "You can nothing," the lieutenant said. He nodded to his men. They moved like trained soldiers, efficient and silent. Douglas screamed as they grabbed his arms, the gun clattering to the floor. His legs kicked. His mouth opened in pleas that dissolved into animal sounds. They dragged him toward the door, and in his final moment visible to the world, Douglas Hale looked directly at Nicholas Calabrese. Nicholas met his gaze and raised his coffee cup in a slow, deliberate gesture. He took another sip as Douglas's screams mixed with the sound of rain and the diner door slamming shut. The Nakamura lieutenant bowed slightly. "Thank you for the information, Calabrese-san. We will handle our business now." "He is all yours," Nicholas said. "He belongs to no one anymore." Douglas was never seen again. No body, no evidence, no trace except for the wet footprints on the black and white floor that Nino would quietly clean away with a mop. 11:30 at night. Rachel Dawson sat in her penthouse office 40 stories above the city, her fingers moving across a tablet screen. 12 women. 12 names. 12 lives she owned completely. She was reviewing inventory when the windows exploded inward. Federal agents crashed through the doors like a tide of black armor. Tactical vests. Assault rifles. The team moved with the precision of people who had done this 10,000 times before. The lead agent, a woman with gray eyes and a voice like breaking glass, held up a badge. "Rachel Dawson, you are under arrest for human trafficking in violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping," the agent said. Each word was a nail being driven through something living. Rachel stood slowly. Her composure was a suit of armor, but armor can crack. "You cannot prove anything," she said, and her voice only trembled slightly. "I have lawyers." "I have?" The agent held up a folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, recorded phone conversations. Nicholas's evidence. 8 women had provided testimony. Every transaction was documented. Every threat was recorded. Every moment of Rachel's systematic destruction of other human beings was preserved in ink and digital recording. "You are going to federal prison for 40 years minimum," the agent said. "Possibly more. Depending on what we find in your servers." Rachel's face crumpled like paper. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply aged 10 years in 3 seconds, becoming a hollow thing, a costume with nothing living inside. The agents placed handcuffs around her wrists and led her from the office. Outside, news cameras flashed. Reporters called out questions. Rachel's face appeared on every screen in the city, the beautiful philanthropist revealed as a predator, the charitable donor revealed as a trafficker of human flesh. Her assets were frozen. Her properties were seized. Every woman in her network was freed before dawn. By morning, her empire had ceased to exist. 3 hours later, Nicholas drove through the rain toward the apartment. The city lights blurred past him like scattered prayers. Vinny sat in the passenger seat, checking his phone. The messages kept coming, confirmation from the FBI contact, acknowledgement from the Nakamura family, word that Rachel Dawson was being processed into the federal detention center. "It is finished," Vinny said. Nicholas nodded. The word seemed too small for what had happened, but it was the only word that fit. When he opened the apartment door, Mia was waiting. She stood at the window still, but something had changed in her posture. She was no longer a woman bracing for impact. She had become something harder, something that would not break. Emma was asleep on the couch, the recipe book open beside her. "They are gone," Nicholas said. Mia turned to look at him. Her face was battered and bruised and absolutely beautiful because it was the face of someone who had survived. All of them? Douglas is gone. Rachel is in federal custody. 40 years minimum. He stepped closer. Your grandmother's family. My family. Blood. She was right about that. Mia looked down at the recipe book. I read her notes, she said. About making soup when the storm comes. About feeding the people who stay. Nicholas understood what she was saying beneath the words. She was asking if he would stay. If he would choose her over the organization. If he would choose her when the next storm came, and the one after that. I stayed, he said. The rain kept falling. Outside, the desert was washing itself clean. And in the quiet of the apartment, with Emma sleeping between her siblings, with her grandmother's recipe book closed on the table, Mia Voss understood that family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. The sun rose over Las Vegas like a wound bleeding gold across the desert sky. Inside Marie's kitchen, the smell of chicken soup and rosemary hung heavy in the air, the same recipe that had saved Mia Voss's life 2 years earlier when she was nobody, when she was counting pennies in the dark. She stood at the counter now, wearing chef's whites instead of the stained waitress uniform, her hands moving with the certainty of someone who had finally stopped running. The scar on her left wrist, thin, pale, almost invisible, caught the morning light as she stirred the pot. Nobody would know what that scar meant. Nobody would know that 2 years ago, a man had tried to strangle her with those same hands that now fed a city. But Nicholas Calabrese knew. He sat in the back booth, the same booth where he had watched her collapse 2 years prior, where he had recognized his daughter Emma in the drawing she clutched. The newspaper lay folded on the table in front of him. The headline read, Federal prosecutors announce 40-year sentence for Douglas Hale. Life without parole. Rachel Dawson, her co-conspirator, was already 3 months into a federal detention facility, her money frozen, her connections severed, her name scrubbed from every social registry that had once welcomed her. The debt of $125,000, the amount she had demanded Mia repay for refusing to become one of her trafficking victims, existed now only in history. It was finished. Nicholas folded the newspaper slowly and set it beside his untouched coffee. His men had delivered him the news at 3 in the morning, the confirmation arriving like punctuation on a sentence he had been writing in violence and darkness for 2 years. Vinny had stood in the doorway of his penthouse, rain dripping from his shoulders, and said simply, both of them are gone from the world we control. The rest of it happens in courtrooms now. And the other families? Nicholas had asked. The Nakamuras are satisfied. The feds have what they need. Douglas and Rachel will spend the rest of their lives answering for what they did. Nicholas had nodded then, and Vinny had withdrawn quietly, but in his heart he knew something had shifted in his boss that night. The man who had built an empire on ruthlessness was learning to measure his power differently now. Not in bodies buried or territories conquered, but in lives protected. In a child who now slept without nightmares. In a woman who no longer flinched when doors opened. Mia came to the booth at 7:30 in the morning, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She was moving more slowly now, with intention rather than urgency. The bruises on her throat had faded 3 months ago. Her left eye had healed. But the way she carried herself, that had taken longer to repair. That had required something medicine could not provide. You read it, she said, glancing at the folded newspaper. I read it. She sat across from him without asking permission, something she had started doing 2 weeks ago. The first time she had done it, Vinny and Nino had exchanged a look that suggested they were witnessing something unprecedented, like watching the ocean reverse itself. How do you feel? Nicholas asked. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Her hands rested on the table, and he could see the calluses from her grandmother's kitchen work, from years of carrying trays, from the physical effort of building something beautiful from nothing. I feel like I can finally breathe, she said. Like the weight I have been carrying for 2 years just lifted. Douglas is gone. Rachel is gone. And the money, she shook her head. It was never real. I never actually owed it. He just wanted me to believe I did. That was the whole trap. Yes, Nicholas said. The threat of debt is sometimes more powerful than debt itself. Because debt that is owed can be repaid. But debt you believe you can never escape, that is a prison without walls. Emma appeared from the kitchen then, flour dusting her small hands. At 6 years old, she had learned to read better than most children her age, had started to sing again, had stopped checking the locks on doors when she thought no one was watching. She climbed into the booth beside Nicholas without hesitation. "Mama says we can go to the park after my homework," Emma said. The word struck like lightning. Mama. Not Mrs. Voss or the lady who gave me soup. Mama. Mia's eyes filled with tears so suddenly that she had to look away, and Nicholas reached across the table to squeeze her hand gently. "The park is a good choice," he said to Emma, his voice steady and solid like an oath. "The carousel will be running." Tyler and Sophia appeared then, Mia's own children, moving through the restaurant with the ease of people who had stopped waiting for catastrophe. They had homework spread across a table near the kitchen. They had friends now. They had shoes that fit properly and school supplies they did not have to count. They had a mother who did not come home with terror in her eyes. Nicholas watched Mia with her children, watched the way she moved through the world now, not invisible, not broken, but present and real and claimed. 2 years earlier, she had saved his daughter without knowing who that child was, without knowing that one act of compassion would echo across both their lives like a blade through silence. Vinny brought fresh pastries to the table. Nino arrived with the morning deliveries, setting boxes of supplies on the counter with exaggerated care. Both men had stopped pretending they did not notice how their boss behaved differently now. They had watched him learn Emma's favorite color. They had seen him reading bedtime stories, his deep voice carrying across the apartment, his men positioned outside the door like sentries. They had witnessed the transformation of a man who had buried his own brother, a man who believed mercy was a luxury only the living could afford, learning that mercy was the only thing that made living worth the cost. "Your grandmother was right," Nicholas said to Mia, gesturing toward the kitchen where Marie Castellano's recipes lined the walls in laminated frames. "When the storm comes, you feed the people who stay." Mia looked at her children, at Emma nestled against Nicholas's shoulder, at the restaurant that bore her grandmother's name and her grandmother's recipes. The sign outside read Marie's Kitchen in elegant gold lettering, and every table was occupied by people finding warmth and sustenance in a space that had been born from shared darkness. "I did not know how to do this," Nicholas said quietly, his voice barely audible beneath the morning sounds of the restaurant, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of customers, the children's soft laughter. The family thing. The normal thing. "Neither did I," Mia replied, squeezing his hand in return. "But we are figuring it out together." Outside, the Las Vegas sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of night. The city was waking up to another day of ordinary life, unaware that in a small restaurant bearing the name Marie's Kitchen, 2 broken people had learned to heal each other. Unaware that the most feared man in the city was learning to read bedtime stories. Unaware that a woman who had once counted pennies just to survive was now managing a thriving business where her grandmother's recipes fed hundreds of people weekly. The debt was gone. The threat was gone. The people who had tried to erase them both from the world were now erased from the world themselves, locked away in federal facilities where they would spend decades paying for their cruelty. And Mia Voss, who had been nobody, who had walked Vegas streets in a summer thunderstorm with $5 in her pocket and a heart full of terror, was nobody no longer. She was a woman who had saved a child. She was a woman who had changed the most dangerous man in the city simply by showing him what courage looked like. She was a woman loved, protected, and claimed by people who had chosen to stay when the storm arrived. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. If this story moved your heart, hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the stories that remind us love and loyalty can triumph over even the darkest circumstances. Drop a comment below telling us, when did someone stay for you during your storm? Your story matters. We will see you in the next video. Thank you for staying with us.